So with that, Vincent, please.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming this morning. I'm going to try to talk a little bit off cuff, whatever with the cuff, but I think I'll try to focus in on what my responsibility is here this morning. What's not in the bio is that where I started was in construction at the age of 16. Sweeping floors, cleaning buildings out after the bricklayers did their work, etc. And then I moved on and became a bricklayer, an apprentice bricklayer. I used to belong to Local Number 9 here in Albany for Brooklyn, New York, Bensonhurst. So construction has been in my background for many, many years. I was on the staff of the Peace Corps in West Africa for 5 years during the Nixon administration. After that, I went to the Job Corps and I was running construction training programs for the Job Corps. So construction and construction workers have always been pretty much near and dear to me. In the 80s, I got on something called the U.S.-China Protocols. And I went to China about 16 times between 1983 and 1991, working with the Chinese on construction issues, urban planning, real estate development. My wife told me to get a real job. So in 1992, I bid on this job. At that pay grade, I've been at the same pay grade, no promotions, up or down, in 25 years. So I was hired as the Construction Safety and Occupational Health Manager at the Department of State. Now, what did that entail? Hard hats, steel-toe shoes? I didn't see it that way. At the time, I had visited the State Department in the Office of Foreign Buildings. At the time, it was called FBO, Foreign Buildings Operations, and it was changed a little later to the Overseas Buildings Operations. And I had done some consulting work, and I found out that construction jobs that we were doing overseas were not safe. And that's why they were asking me to come in and talk about construction safety, health, environmental protection in terms of protecting the environment in which the workers were doing their tasks. So since 1992, we finished over 1,300,000,000 work hours for the State Department. State Department is, part of it is a construction and real estate development organization. Right now, today, as we speak, we've got 79 projects around the world for a total of about $6 billion out in contracts. Got about between 16 and 17,000 workers every day, right now as we speak. 70% of them practice the Muslim faith, 75%. Young men, mostly. And they're inside a fence. We're either on a capital project, which is a new embassy compound. It consists of about 9 buildings. We've finished 150 since 9/11, by the way. 150 compounds, 9 buildings since 9/11. Right now we've got 30 under construction. We call them capital projects. And we have about 30 functional, which are very large mechanical and electrical upgrades. And then we have the smaller projects, which are CACs, controlled access facilities, and Marine Security Guard quarters. We're pulling all of our Marines into the compounds. With the large number of workers inside the fence, we started to think some years ago, there is a potential for a lot of unrest. So we look at safety, of course, tools, equipment, machinery, training, capability of our contractors, competent and qualified persons to administer and manage the projects. The State Department has a particular cone. It's called the Foreign Service Construction Engineer. So for those of you in the audience that are thinking, oh, I want to work for the State Department as a Foreign Service officer, that's great. But we looked at engineering schools, and we pull engineers out of the engineering schools, and we have a special cone for them that's known as a Foreign Service Construction Engineer. Liberal arts, history, political science, international affairs, diplomacy, public diplomacy, all of it, you're not going to get in the engineering schools. So what we have to do is once we get our Foreign Service Construction Engineer in, we want to give them the kind of training and sensitivity so that when they're managing the projects overseas, that they can comply with what we have in terms of federal acquisition regulations. The FAR basically dictates how we're going to do business with our contractors. I'm going to give you a handout anyway. What I have is, it's a document that's from the Office of the Procurement Executive. The subject is combating trafficking in persons. Now, how do we get there? Well, about 2009, 2010, we, at the State Department, were asked to work with people on Capitol Hill, Defense Department, FBI, Central Intelligence Agency, a lot of the agencies, to work together on understanding how we contract in construction. Because we may have 16,000, but only God knows how many DOD has out there, and some of the other agencies that are doing construction work around the world. So we came up with a series of recommendations, really beefy subject matter, and we presented this to the administration, which was kind of an upgrade from what Bush did back in 2000 on trafficking. We came up with a protocol for contracting, and it became an executive order that was signed by President Obama in 2012. I have the number in my head, it was up on the screen, but it's executive order. If you Google executive order President Obama 2012, it'll come up. What we did was in the State Department, we created policy. And basically, what we do is, in the Office of Procurement, Acquisitions, when we send out a package for contractors to bid on, that package has a series of directives. The package asks that in the proposal, when it comes back to us for review, the technical proposal basically says how they're going to manage, what their capabilities are. There's just a lot of factors involved. But the factor that we're involved with here is safety, recruitment, and housing. Now, on the safety piece, we have safety and health at the project site. That gets into a lot. It gets into basically competent persons, safety and health program managers, making sure we have safety officers. It gets into tools, equipment, machinery, certifications, tower cranes, bulldozers. In other words, we get into the whole area of what the contractor is going to be required to provide in terms of tools, equipment, and machinery. Manufactured according to international standard and manufactured for professional construction use. So we try to control the safety environment, which young workers that are traveling to the projects, that are on the project sites, they get the feeling that we care about them. Now, I'm going someplace with this. In the 1,300,000,000 work hours, we have not had one incident of violence inside the fence. No one has tried to shoot us, blow us up, commit an act of arson, sabotage, or take hostages. Now remember, inside the fence, we could either be doing a capital project, which is an embassy compound away from the existing embassy, or if we're doing a functional, then we're on the compound. And we have workers in the building, past, post one, the Marines, up on the second floor, third floor, fourth floor, and so on. Be very easy with what we call weapons of opportunity, construction weapons of opportunity, drywall knives, axes, all kinds of things you find at a construction site. There's nothing to stop 3 or 4 workers from grabbing the ambassador, the DCM, the political officer, or anybody else inside the compound. We have local guards at the gates on all of our projects, our new projects, our capitals, away from the embassy. Local guards. We don't have Americans checking the concrete trucks. They're all local. They get paid very well. They're vetted. We do the best we can in terms of providing a good force that can screen. We just haven't had the incidents. Now, we've been in bad neighborhoods for the past 15 years. I'm working with Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq. We're talking billions of dollars in construction we've spent in all these places. On our projects, OBO projects, inside OBO fences, we haven't had the violence. Sorry, I think that's great. And I think, what are the reasons? Going back to 1992, 93, when you're talking about heading some of this stuff up, safety is important for workers. Training and orientation, teaching them something, Job Corps, Peace Corps, those kinds of things, they rub off on a lot of these kids. In Pakistan right now, as we speak this morning, I got 3,300 workers. A lot of them are under 30. We make sure they get a tea break. We give all of our workers, all 16,000, every day a meal, free. Training, protective equipment, boots, shoes, all of the hard hat, all of that stuff is all paid for. So what we've done is we worked with our contractors, American contractors, and in the bid package that goes out, they say, you will provide all of this. Tell us how you're going to provide it. So when the proposal comes back in, I sit on a technical evaluation panel, and they say, well, Vince, you don't do this, but you do this. So I look at the safety, I look at the health. I look at the recruitment agreements have to be in their language. I look at the way they're being recruited, labor brokers, where they be recruited from. All of these things. Housing. Now, in the PIB, the COR, Contracting Officers Representative. Now, who's the Contracting Officers Representative? It's our Foreign Service Construction Engineer. He's responsible as the key person on the site for making sure that the PIB is adhered to. We have to do quarterly housing inspections, sanitation inspections. We have in the PIB, there's a list of questions that you ask the workers, 15% of the workers. So we're constantly trying to find out what's going on the project site. Now, it's a hell of a job. Right now, we have a hiring freeze, and really need 200 engineers around the world. We're down to the bones, bare bones, and yet we're still getting more and more projects, 79 projects this week, for a value of over $6 billion. So, the PIB, if you read this, and you read the total part of it, I just put out just the executive summary and a few other things. But if you go to the PIB, you'll see all of the requirements for the COR, Contracting Officers Representative. Anytime we have issues with contractors, we get to the contracting officer. So there are a lot of safeguards. Now, I know I have time, I could spend days on talking about a lot of these things that we do. But the thing is, if you, in the future, in your careers, if you're dealing with people and contractors and so on, look at some of the things that we already do. You got to have competent, qualified, dedicated people. You don't ever want to do, think, or say anything that's going to have the effect to humiliate somebody. That's one of the things that we guard against on our jobs. No yelling, no screaming. This is not New York City. I worked in New York City as a bricklayer. It's, you know, we have a certain decorum on the site. You don't criticize a young man in front of the other workers. Very dangerous to do that, particularly in Islam. We have prayer rooms, places for them to pray. We have washing stations for wash, so they can perform washing before prayers 5 times a day. So if during the shift, they have to pray 3 times, we do that. So there's a whole host of things that we do. We have a doctor's on site. We take care of very mild medical issues. You got a stomach ache or a headache, and and we do vaccinations for any kind of malaria, for example, prophylactic. So anyway, I can get into just a number of things. Let me just suffice to say that what we've done is we've created a work environment that these young men, in some cases women in Asia, we have a lot of women on our construction sites. We've created a work environment that doesn't guarantee we won't have, but it significantly reduces the chances that we will have an act of violence. Remember now, we have a big sign out there, that says, U.S. Embassy under construction. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm focused in on where we are. But the biggest thing, my biggest message is, as I said before, don't do, say, or think anything in these cultures that's going to have the effect of humiliating someone in front of their peers. That is critical. Toilets, showers, lockers, cleanliness, washing before prayers, all of these things you have to go online and Google the word voodoo. Does everybody here know what voodoo is? Oh, come on, please. Voodoo is the act of washing before prayers. W-U-D-U. Keep this in mind. Toilet is important in many parts of the world. And what we do is we make sure that toilet is important. I just got back from Colombo last week, Sri Lanka, and I had a real problem with the toilets. And sure enough, some of the workers were complaining. So sanitation, health, training. We care about you, and expressing that in real terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. And as I listened to you, I was actually thinking back on the first panel about the question about the private sector and supply chain. And in a way, you've managed to fix the issue of supply chain by creating these policies. You know who your workers are, you treat them well, and in that way, you're not incorporating issues like trafficking and exploitation and other things into your supply chain, if you want to call it that. So it's an interesting way that perhaps policy and approaches that are more culturally sensitive can address some of that. I think too, as we look at how violent extremism is defined and what gives rise to radicalization, to people joining these types of groups, grievances is often one of them. Grievances against their government, against their communities, feeling left out, feeling mistreated, misunderstood. So those are things in many ways in your policies that you're addressing as well.